10th episode begins with a flashback to 1920. Henry, Julia, and Uncle Lamb are celebrating little Claire's second birthday. Lamb gives a toast to Claire, insisting she has the look of an adventurer. May her adventures take her far and wide, but she will always find her way home. At Castle Leoch, a woman in a light blue wedding gown walks slowly down the aisle in the main hall. A white veil covers her face. Then, we flash back to hours earlier that day. Brian complains about what Ellen told him at Braemar when she broke up with him. Murtaugh listens intently. Murtaugh urges his cousin to forget Ellen's words. What did her eyes say? Brian replies that she's clearly still enamored with him. Murtaugh claims that the love Brian and Ellen share is the stuff of legends. Suddenly, the gallowglasses barrel into view. They attack Brian and Murtaugh. One of them buries an arrow in Murtaugh's leg. Brian takes out two of them before tying the last living gallowglass to a tree. He slaps the dude around while demanding to know who hired him. The man finally discloses a name, Colum Mackenzie. Brian stabs the last gallowglass through the heart. After briefly checking in on Murtaugh, Brian makes a beeline for Castle Leoch. Meanwhile, Ellen and Mrs. Fitz walk through the main hall as folks flutter about them in decorating mode. Marcus McRannock approaches the pair. He wishes Ellen well on the day of her nuptials before offering her a gift. At the same time, Dougal has fun with a maid. Maura Grant, for whom said maid works, pops by to order her maid back to work. Dougal doesn't recognize Maura, who's Malcolm's sister, until she reintroduces herself. Then, Jocasta, Janet, and Mrs. Fitz help Ellen pack her belongings in her quarters. All those books are heading to Castle Grant now. Ellen mends fences with her sisters, particularly Jocasta. She apologizes for not consulting Jocasta before Red Jacob married her off to John Cameron. Jocasta looks touched by her sister's apology. Elsewhere in Castle Leathers, Lovat vents to Julia about the disrespect he faced at Braemar, courtesy of Uncle Grant. This will not stand. Julia urges Lovat not to pay Grant any mind. After all, per the prophecy, baby Simon will be the King of Scotland. Julia encourages Lovat to rest for a spell. Lovat orders Julia to head to his chambers. While Brian rides to Castle Leoch, Ellen has her hen party. She sits in a circle with Jocasta, Janet, Mrs. Fitz, Maura, and other women. They trade drinks and dirty bedroom stories. Mrs. Fitz tells the group that her husband claims she drives him wild. When it's Ellen's turn, she recites a tongue-twisting riddle. Jocasta attempts to recite the same riddle and fails. Maura calls Ellen out for the language she uses. As Malcolm's sister, she's protective of him. She wants his future wife to be worthy of him. Jocasta comes to Ellen's defense. After Maura leaves the circle, Ellen thanks Jocasta. Next, Julia bids farewell to Davina. Julia plans to grab William and rendezvous with Henry at their designated spot near the broken wall. She urges Davina to shout for Balak. Let Balak chase her and Henry. Then, when Lovat learns of what transpired, he will assume that Henry kidnapped Julia and William. This takes the heat off Davina. Julia flees the castle with William in her arms. Davina, still in the kitchen, shouts for Balak. As Julia reaches Henry, she quickly tells him that Balak will inevitably chase them. Sure enough, he's hot on their heels. Julia shouts for Balak, making it look like Henry's kidnapping her and William. Then, Henry knocks Balak unconscious with a rock before our trio scampers off. After this, Brian sneaks into Castle Leoch. Jocasta and Brian enter Ellen's chambers. Jocasta and Brian explain that Colum hired the gallowglasses to kill him. Ellen realizes that her brother reneged on his end of the bargain. He promised her he wouldn't harm Brian. Ellen makes an executive decision. If Colum can go back on his word, then so can she. Mrs. Fitz shudders to think what would happen to Ellen if she doesn't marry Malcolm. But Ellen doesn't care. Later, Ellen chats with Colum in the latter's office. He gifts her with a fancy new quill and ink pot. He hopes they will correspond after Ellen moves in with Malcolm. Realizing her brother will never admit to breaking his promise, Ellen leaves it at that. At the same time, Henry, Julia, and William ride away from Castle Leathers. We see another flashback to 1923, shortly before our lovebirds inadvertently traveled through time. Henry and Julia sit on the deck of their beachfront house, watching 5-year-old Claire and Uncle Lamb play in the sand. Henry surprises Julia with tickets to Inverness for their fateful Scottish holiday. Julia surprises Henry in turn with her pregnancy. Back at Castle Leoke, we see a packed house for Ellen and Malcolm's wedding. However, Ellen's gone all runaway bride. An irate Malcolm listens as Colum and Ned inform him that Ellen has fled the scene. Colum tries to alleviate the tension in the room by suggesting that Ellen might return. Once she does, Colum will ensure she answers for her behavior. Malcolm insists that once Archbug retrieves his blade ear, the Mackenzies will pay. Uncle Grant steps in to speak for his nephew. He declares that heads will roll if they can't remedy the situation. After the younger and elder Grants depart, Colum orders Ned to get Dougal. It's high time Dougal fulfill his duty to Clan Mackenzie. And what is that duty, to be exact? We see the same faceless bride walking slowly down the aisle. Once she reaches the priest, she removes the veil. It's Mora Grant. The priest calls for the groom to step forward, Dougal Mackenzie. Malcolm sulks beside his uncle in the audience. After this, Jocasta and Mrs. Fitz fill Ellen and Brian in on the impromptu nuptials of Dougal and Mora. Jocasta and Mrs. Fitz will return for our lovebirds during the reception. Then they can escape unencumbered while everyone's distracted by drinking and dancing. Meanwhile, only Colum seems to truly look content among the bridal party. Colum delivers a hearty toast for the newlyweds. Mora proposes that she and Dougal make a beeline for their marital bed. Dougal obliges. Everyone cheers as they leave. Once upstairs, Mora asks Dougal how he would like to proceed. Dougal is overwhelmed. He didn't expect to end the day with a wife. Mora's ready to get down to business so they can return to the reception. Meanwhile, Mrs. Fitz and Jocasta return to Ellen and Brian to give them the go-ahead to leave. Ellen bids farewell to her sister and her maid. Elsewhere, Uncle Grant urges the Laird of Clan Grant to pull himself together. Malcolm is heartbroken. Uncle Grant advises Malcolm to exact revenge, make Ellen pay. Later, Brian and Ellen run into Malcolm on their way out. Malcolm takes his fury out on them both. He refuses to let them leave. Instead, Malcolm whips out his sword. Brian begs him to stand down. He doesn't want to fight Malcolm. However, Malcolm is seeing red, so Brian and Malcolm have it out in a skirmish. Unfortunately, it culminates in Malcolm's death. Brian stabs the Laird through the heart. After this, Brian drags Malcolm's body out of the way so he and Ellen can escape. Next, Ellen and Brian ride separate horses to Brian and Murtaugh's makeshift hideout. Murtaugh is pleased that they brought him food and alcohol. Ellen informs Murtaugh that Malcolm is dead. There will undoubtedly be fallout from this, and the shrapnel will strike them all. Later, Lovat and Davina search for Julia and William outside Castle Leathers. Davina lies, claiming she didn't see who kidnapped Julia. Balak did, though. Lovat curses Balak for getting knocked unconscious by a Sassenach. Lovat surmises that Henry, whom Julia dubbed Simon's admirer at Braemar, is behind the kidnappings. Archbug arrives with his crew, asking Lovat if he's seen a man. This confirms Lovat's suspicion that Henry is the kidnapper. Lovat attempts to join Arch in his search, stating that Henry stole his wife and son. Arch rejects the offer. He vows to bring Julia and Simon back to Lovat when he finds Henry. Meanwhile, Ellen tends to Brian's arm wound, courtesy of the late Malcolm. Later, Murtaugh tells Brian he's going hunting. He won't return until the morning at the latest. He's giving the happy couple some alone time. Ellen and Brian sit outside, basking in that post-coital glow. They're wrapped in Brian's tartan. After this, they bind themselves by blood, slicing cuts on each other's palms before reciting vows and clasping hands. Suddenly, they notice a plethora of burning crosses scattered across the highlands. Brian notes that it's a call to action for the clans. They must report to their lairds for battle. This signals the beginning of the Jacobite Rising of 1715. Brian adds that if one refuses the call, they face certain death. Ellen vows to support Brian, even as he heads into battle. Finally, Henry, Julia, and William arrive at Craignaddon. Henry hears the requisite buzzing emitting from the stones. Julia wonders if William can even pass through said stones. What if he's stuck here? Henry counters that time travel might be hereditary. He proposes that one of them should try to go through with William. If it turns out that William isn't a traveler, then the other will remain behind until the second person returns. Unfortunately, Arch and his crew are bounding up the hill to Craignaddon. In a split-second decision, Henry insists that Julia should go through with William. He tells Julia he loves her before they kiss. He grabs her arm, her palm out, and moves it toward one of the stones. But we don't know if she makes contact. We don't see if she and William travel forward successfully. In the final scene, we flash back to 1923. Julia and Henry bid farewell to Claire and Uncle Lamb on the train platform. Once aboard the train, the couple hangs out their window, waving to their daughter. Of course, they don't know that this will be the last time they see Claire.